will Jews leave New York? Maybe. What has Nick Fuentes done to advance the MAGA agenda? Like, literally, what is one thing that he's practically done that has helped the conservative movement? You can open any page of a Hebrew Bible, and you know what it won't talk about? Tikkun Olam. And it won't talk about the ethics of socialism and Zohran Mamdani. So give me a break with this Jewish values demand. I support Zohran Mamdani. What a load of horse crap.
Hello and welcome to the Moster Show, where we discuss news and current events as it relates to the Jewish community and beyond. Before I introduce my guest today, I wanted to ask you to subscribe to this channel. It's very important that we reach 1,000 subscribers in the next 3 days, so please do so now, even while listening to the rest of this episode. Also, if you would like to sponsor an episode or advertise your business, please email us at info@themostershow.com. Our guest today is Shabbos Kestenbaum. He's a political commentator at PragerU. He initially rose to fame when he openly criticized and filed a lawsuit against his school, Harvard University, for allowing pro-Palestinian and sometimes pro-Hamas students to disrupt life on campus and endanger the Jewish students on campus. He was a proud liberal until October 7, but he voted for Donald Trump after seeing how liberals responded to October 7th and the party's refusal to address the anti-Semitism in their midst. He has since become a leading voice in the fight against anti-Semitism. I invited him today to discuss the election of Zohran Mamdani and what that portends for the Jewish community of New York and beyond. We will hopefully touch on a few other topics as well. So, hello, Shabbos. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So you've been such an important voice for the Jewish community since October 7, and to me in particular, you've been a breath of fresh air because I too had been entrenched in liberal politics and leftist causes for over a decade prior to October 7th. And seeing my former, quote unquote, allies shrug or even celebrate the attacks and seeing the way Israel and Jews were being maligned just for fighting back and defending themselves against Hamas left me in despair. And then you came up on the map and helped me process things and realize that I'm not crazy for reevaluating and reconsidering all my prior allies' causes and beliefs. So first of all, thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
The New York City mayoral election took place on Tuesday, and as expected, Zohran Mamdani won. The campaign was plagued by accusations of anti-Semitism, so I wanted to ask you first, what is your overall reaction to Mamdani winning the mayoral race?
My reaction to Zohran Mamdani winning the race is my same reaction to the proliferation of anti-Semitism on American institutions of higher learning, which is I'm shocked, but I'm certainly not surprised, because this is the inevitable outcome of decades and decades of political indoctrination, both within academia and within American political culture, a culture that is a grievance culture, a culture that is very much a victimhood culture, a culture that believes that if we simply free Palestine, if we eradicate billionaires, if we upend the system, whatever that means, then all of our grievances and problems go away. And so Zohran Mamdani did a masterful job of placating to the lowest common denominator of our political culture. That if you look at his campaign policies, everything is free. Everything is subsidized. You don't have to do anything. You're not the problem. The problem is everyone else. The problem, as I said, are the billionaires. The problem is Israel. The problem is Andrew Cuomo. Now, keep in mind, Andrew Cuomo ran the worst primary mayoral campaign in New York City history, and he ran one of the worst general election campaigns for New York City. He was a terrible candidate. The Jewish community, of course, remember him as the one who killed our grandparents during COVID, the one who singled out the Jewish community during COVID, the one who had to resign after dozens of serious allegations of sexual harassment. So he was a terrible candidate, don't get me wrong. But the New York City of today is very different demographically and culturally from the New York City of even just 10 years ago, which is why I think one of the two most fascinating polls or exit polls coming out of this race showed that those who were living in New York City for 5 or 10 years or less overwhelmingly supported Zohran Mamdani. I mean, overwhelmingly. And then also those who have a college degree or higher also overwhelmingly supported Zohran Mamdani. That to me are sort of the two most foundational claims to Mamdanification of the Democratic Party. I would also say that I caution certainly Republicans and those in the conservative movement not to read too much into these results. This is New York City, after all. This is not a bellwether for the rest of the country. This is a far left, big blue city, and I would caution us into thinking that this represents the future of the Democratic Party or the future of American political discourse. I really don't think that is true. I think Republicans will do their best to pretend it is true, and I think socialists will do their best to also pretend it is true. But ultimately, he actually got significantly less support than, let's say, Kamala Harris did when she was running for president for the New York City vote. He does not have a large mandate. I don't even think he cracked 52%. So he did win fair and square, and more power to him. But this is not a large mandate, and I do think this is a blip rather than an historical trend.
Okay, well, I appreciate that perspective. The Jewish people in particular felt, at least the majority of the Jewish people felt pretty concerned and worried. And I wanted to dissect it a little bit because I myself, I've had so many thoughts and questions swirling in my head, both during the election as I saw him rising and becoming the front runner, and of course, the fact since he actually won the election. And I imagine I'm not alone. So I was hoping that perhaps you can help me and others in my shoes make better sense of it. So for the Jewish community in particular, what is so upsetting about this? Do you generally, it sounds like from what you're describing, you don't even agree with his policies that are not related to the Jewish community, right? Free this, free that, and I get that. So, so that's one thing I get. Do you feel like he's too young and potentially incompetent, or is it mainly his views on Israel that disturb you?
It's not that I think that he's too young or too incompetent. He is young and he is incompetent. I mean, he was a failed rapper, for God's sakes, who himself admitted that he only got this far in life because of nepotism. And again, that's the stunning irony of his campaign as he talks about, the billionaire class. He talks about the elites. He is part of that class. He is part of that elite.
He
I mean,
sure
it's
is.
so ludicrous how during the primary debate, for example, he said that I'm not going to go to any foreign country, let alone Israel, because my primary responsibility is for the people of New York. And then 2 days after winning the
Yeah,
nomination in the Democratic Party, he went to Uganda to his family's multi-million-dollar compound that is
right.
guarded by private armed security 24/7. I mean, he's a chameleon. He's a hypocrite. And yes, we can talk about anti-Semitism, and I'll get to that because certainly as a Jewish community, that's what we're concerned of. But we don't even have to talk about anti-Semitism. And on the campaign trail, I did my best not to talk about anti-Semitism because his policies alone would be so
Right.
wildly destructive if even a tenth of them were implemented on the people of New York City. I'll give you one quick example. He talks about the need to eradicate billionaires in New York City, which, leaving aside the fact that New York City is the financial capital of the world, and if billionaires and a significant amount of the working class were to leave the city, I mean, it would destroy our economy. But on a practical level, it's ludicrous because the top 1% of earners in New York City pay 48% of all the revenue, whereas the bottom 50% of New York City pay 4% of the revenue. So in order for all of his expansionist programs to actually be implemented, whether it's free childcare, whether it's free busing, whether it's government and grocery stores, you
Right.
actually need wealthy people to pay for all of those things. So he's trying to have his cake and eat it too by saying there shouldn't be any billionaires, but we actually need billionaires because there's no other way any of our plans will work. So he has the economic understanding of a ninth grade AP macroeconomic student who's trying to be edgy. His plans will never work. And anytime they've been tested, whether it was in Cuba or Venezuela, they lead to people coming to the United States with on boats. So that's the first
Mhm.
part. In terms of the particularities of your question, the mainstream media have concocted a narrative whereby, yes, the Jewish community is uncomfortable because he's in staunch support of Palestine. That's not why we're uncomfortable. We're not uncomfortable because, he's the first Muslim mayor, which is what Politico and the New York Times were saying, that that's what makes Jews uncomfortable.
Right.
We don't care. We care that this is someone who literally rapped in praise of the Holy Land Five, which are a convicted front group for Hamas. That's not me saying this as a Jew. This isn't me saying this as a conservative. I'm simply quoting the actual court case. I'm actually quoting the ruling of the judge. The Holy Land Five were convicted for actually providing material support to terrorism, and Zohran Mamdani, as a Nepo baby rapper, praises his love for them.
Right.
This is insanity. This is someone who saw the attack on the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001. His immediate reaction was then to go campaign with Hassan Piker numerous times, someone who has stated repeatedly that America deserved 9/11. This is someone who believes that we should be arresting Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the freely elected Prime Minister of the sovereign country of Israel, but at the same time has no thoughts on whether Hamas should disarm or not. He is a chameleon. He's a snake. He's a
Right.
hypocrite. He's out of his element. He's out of his depth. And the real losers are the people of New York.
Right. So he and some of his supporters would argue, fine, that's his position about Israel, but he's running New York City. He says he's going to be a mayor for all, including the Jewish community. Last month I had a guest on, and he was a Hasidic lobbyist, activist,
I know
and
Ezra.
Ezra Friedlander, and he felt that although Mamdani's views on Israel are disturbing and upsetting to many of us, that he'd be protective of the local Jewish community. Do you generally agree with that
Hang on.
assessment?
He was protesting the local Jewish community. Forget about Israel. This is someone who, a week after October 7th, sat in the middle of traffic to protest the Zionist entity's genocide in Gaza. He was arrested. This is someone who's repeatedly broken the law. He's going to protect Jewish students? He encouraged. He visited the encampments at Columbia University to give them strength and solidarity. So I agree. Forget about Israel. I barely talk about Israel when it comes to Zohran Mamdani. Focus on New York City. This is someone who supports jihadism. This is someone who supports radicalism. This is someone who supports extremism. This is someone who literally has stated we have to tax white neighborhoods. We have to defund the New York Police Department. He would eradicate the Office of Strategic Affairs, which were instrumental in cracking down on the anti-Americanism and the vandalism at Columbia University and other New York campuses. So I agree.
Right.
Stop talking about Israel. Focus on his own words when it came to the people of New York. He'd be wildly destructive, as he already has been. And Andrew Cuomo, even though he did run a terrible campaign, he only made one good point during the debate, which Zohran Mamdani was totally caught off guard. If Zohran cares about all of these issues, then why when he was a state assemblyman, he literally did not propose a single policy, a single bill that would crack down on all of these issues that he suddenly cares about? Why did he have the lowest attendance record of any New York State assemblyman?
Right.
Why, of the only 4 pieces of legislation that he ever proposed, one of them would have stripped the nonprofit tax-exempt status of almost every single Jewish charity in New York City? Again, he's a con artist.
Right.
He does not know what he's talking about. He has the understanding of a fourth grader when it comes to economies, when it comes to incentives, when it comes to capitalism. And I agree with you. Forget about Israel. I don't talk about Israel in relation to Zohran Mamdani. I talk about his wildly destructive policies and his inability to understand market economies.
Right. Okay, I still feel like it's important to think about how he would be for the local Jewish community. So from your perspective, the fact that he sort of tacitly maybe supports jihad, wouldn't condemn the phrase from the river to the sea or whatever that is, or globalized intifada, sorry. Do you feel like it could translate into actual physical harm to the local Jewish community, and how?
It already has. That's the point I've been trying to make since the inception of his campaign. I don't care that he can't condemn free Palestine or globalize it. Who cares? Those are slogans. I care that he has been repeatedly arrested for trying to sow civil unrest in our own city, trying to target not just Jewish students on Columbia's campus, on NYU's campus, on the CUNY campuses, but to target anyone who has a difference of opinion. So he's already been destructive to our city.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. So another thought I kept having after this election is that perhaps part of the pain we as Jews are experiencing is just the reality that this candidate was able to cruise to victory with practically zero outreach to the mainstream Jewish community, be it the religious mainstream, like the Haredi leaders, and the secular mainstream, like the UJA, the JCRC, the ADL. And I'm wondering if maybe it's just a sort of a type of pain of feeling rejected, feeling like technically we're not needed in order to win. Do you feel like that's something that people are feeling?
Maybe, especially because if you look at staunchly Jewish communities like Midwood or Rego Park or Borough Park or Williamsburg. I mean, Eric Adams got more votes than Zohran Mamdani in those districts. So the Jewish community did everything we were supposed to do. The Orthodox community, I should say, at least.
Right.
Jews who came from actual totalitarianistic and authoritarian regimes, the Bukharan community, the Persian community. They did everything they were supposed to do. They came out in record numbers, and more power to them. So it's an interesting idea. Maybe they feel dejected that clearly their votes weren't enough. So that's interesting. Maybe, probably. In terms of the Jewish nonprofits and the legacy organizations, I mean, I think they've been a failure for lots of different reasons, not because of the least because of Mamdani. So I don't really have much sympathy for those organizations, and if they have to go into obscurity, then I really okay.
I see.
They're essentially obscure to the average New York Jewish student anyway, so I don't think it'll
I
make much
see.
of a difference.
I think the point I was trying to make is that his ability to cruise to victory without any of their support could signal to others, even friendly politicians or currently friendly, I don't know, take Hakeem Jeffries or whatever, Richie Torres, that they too can sort of drop their support for the Jews and Israel and still win. In other words,
No.
there's like a vulnerability that's been exposed on us, on the Jewish community, that nobody needs us. They could get by without us.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's true, and again, this is why I caution people about reading too much into this election. Andrew Cuomo was a terrible candidate. No one liked him. Even those who voted for him, like myself, did not like him. So that 40-ish% coupled with Curtis Sliwa, 48, 49%, that is a significant coalition. Michael Blake, who you won't remember, he's someone who ran for mayor for about 4 minutes. He now has issued a primary challenge against Richie Torres, and I can tell you as a Riverdalian resident, the entirety of the Jewish community will rally in support and in defense of Richie Torres. I will do my absolute best, and I can guarantee you right here, right now, you can bookmark this, that Richie Torres will be reelected in overwhelming numbers. So people can try the Zohran Mamdani playbook, but I really don't think it would work. I really don't think that would work. As I keep
Right.
saying, he did not win a large enough share to make a conclusion whereby we can give up Israel, we can give up the Jewish community here in New York, we can give up capitalism. And again, as someone who's like sort of a conservative, I would encourage Democrats to try that logic, and you will lose elections. I'm fairly confident in that. We have to remember that the story of Zohran Mamdani isn't really Zohran Mamdani. It's the story of the inefficacy of the Democratic Party to stand up to the most radical elements of their base.
I see. So going along this line of thinking of sort of feeling rejected, I think one of the things I know I'm experiencing, and I think a lot of people are experiencing, is just how dismissive people are about the legitimate concerns that Jews, raise about him and just in general. So I'll just to give you an example, someone will express like a heartfelt emotion about their fear, about Mamdani on Twitter, X, and they'll get a few likes, a few dozen, maybe even a few hundreds. Then a Mamdani supporter would come around, make some snide, dismissive comment, and get tens of thousands of likes and reposts and all that. And it sort of like crystallizes to us how vastly outnumbered we are and how many people there are out there who truly couldn't care less how we feel, no matter how legitimate the concern we raise is.
I would agree with the premise. I would disagree with the example. So the example of social media is a really bad example, especially on Twitter, because 2/3 of all accounts on Twitter are not actual people. They're like bots. And those with the
Two thirds.
loudest, sorry?
2/3?
Yeah, 2/3. So those with
Wow.
the loudest voices and the most radical, people like Jackson Hinkle or Nick Fuentes, the overwhelming support that they're receiving and likes and comments and engagement, they're
Yeah.
not actual people. This is a foreign bot. Again, this is not
Okay,
me,
fine.
Shabbos.
If that's the case, why can they have so many bots? Why are the bots so anti-Semitic?
I mean, if you wanna pay money to get your own bots, I mean, go for it. There are a lot of
That's what it is?
organizations that will gladly sell you foreign bots.
Interesting.
I believe that if you have truth and reason and logic on your side, you don't really need bots, and if that means I
Right.
get less engagement and less clicks and less views, then so be it. I'm not really in the business of likes and clicks and views. I'm in the business of truth telling. If Nick Fuentes will generate outrage by saying that blacks should be imprisoned and women whom we disagree with politically should be raped, I mean, go for it, but it's certainly not a hill I would ever want to die on, nor an ideology or movement I would ever want to be associated with. So,
Right.
in terms of the specific example, I don't think social media is a good measurement or barometer of how the American people are feeling. That's number one. In fact, I think only 25% of Americans are even on Twitter. So that's number one. Number two, in terms of the general statement, though, I would agree with you that yes, this election has exposed the intellectual bankruptcy of leftism and of the liberal movement more broadly speaking, because I'm not black, spoiler, and I would never tell a black person what is or isn't what is or isn't racism, because I, as a white person, don't have that lived experience. And I remember very clearly when I was on the very far left, marching with Black Lives Matter. And when conservatives would say, well, all lives matter, we would say, it's true, all lives matter, but right now we're focusing on black lives because they're
Right.
the ones being, victimized and experiencing systemic racism and being killed by the cops or whatever our talking point was. Yet when it comes to anti-Semitism, I mean, the Democratic Party can't even say the word anti-Semitism. Their word for anti-Semitism is anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. They are literally incapable of just saying
Right.
anti-Semitism. They're literally incapable of just condemning Jew hatred without also talking about Muslims, without also talking about Palestine and Gaza. So the intellectual bankruptcy of the liberal movement has really been brought to the forefront because of people like Zohran Mamdani. And yes, we care about all people and black and brown voices and indigenous, queer, whatever. But the moment Jews say, okay, well, then treat us the same, all of a sudden, oh, you mean the Zionists who have all the white privilege, who have all the money, who control the banks? I mean, the hypocrisy is stunning. And it's one of the reasons I left the left.
Wow. So what do you make of the Jews for Zoran? Some of them have like literally made a Shehecheyanu on his election. Do you feel like they are intentionally playing dumb, or are they dumb?
Oh,
Or
let me be clear. I don't think they're intentionally playing dumb. I think they genuinely are stupid, dumb people. And I got in trouble a few days ago because I posted on my Twitter how a Mamdani canvasser came to my parents' apartment, and she came to my house uninvited, unannounced, and she had said, "I'm voting for Zohran Mamdani because of my Jewish values, and you, sir," pointing to me, "you, Shabbos Kestenbaum, should also be voting for Zohran Mamdani because of your Jewish values." So I thought to myself, okay, if this person is so passionate about their Jewish values, and if their Jewish identity is so central that they're thereby basing their politics on their Judaism, I said, okay, what's this week's Torah portion? Which is an obvious basic question on said Jewish values. And mind
right,
you, hopefully your audience will get this. I asked that question 2 weeks after Simchas Torah, which is when we finish the cycle of the Torah and we start from the beginning. So all
right,
she had to do was just count two
count,
weeks. It's not a very
right,
difficult question. And of course, she couldn't do it. These are
right,
Jews who overwhelmingly have zero affiliation with the Jewish synagogue, have never been to a Jewish day school, have
except to
never been to
invoke it,
Israel.
except
What?
to invoke it when they want to
Exactly,
get their
exactly.
Jewish bread.
That's what I'm getting to. They cannot identify a Jewish command outside of Tikkun Olam, which there are 613 commandments. Tikkun Olam is not even one of them. These are Jews who do not show up for the Jewish community, who have shown zero
Right.
solidarity with Jews facing anti-Semitism. And I don't mean that people stole their Israeli flag or Zionism. I mean, Magen David Yeshiva, the day after Zohran Mamdani was reelected, had swastikas drawn outside their dorm window. And oddly enough, all the Jews for Zohran Mamdani who talk about Jewish values and Jewish values and Jewish values, oddly enough, they're so silent when it comes to like
Right.
blatant Jew hatred. When Jewish students are being physically assaulted on Columbia University's campus. That's not me speaking as a conservative or conjecture or hyperbole or speculation. I can tell you about friends who were physically assaulted on Columbia's campus. Oddly enough, the Jewish values, the Jews for Mamdani, they can't say a goddamn thing. It's because they're not Jews for Mamdani, they're New Yorkers for Mamdani, and they have used their Judaism as a platform by which they can hijack actual Jewish values. There's nothing Jewish about someone saying that he does not believe in the Jewish state to exist as a Jewish state. And by the way, you can open up any page of the Hebrew Bible and it will talk about page after page after page the
Yeah.
centrality that the land of Israel plays in our lives.
Right.
It is a commandment right now for Jews to be living in the land of Israel. We can't even perform a third of all the commandments because we don't have a third temple in the land of Israel. Almost the entirety of the Jewish calendar revolves around things that happened in the land of Israel. I
Right.
pray 3 times a day, unlike the Jews from Mamdani. Every time I pray, for dozens and dozens of times, thrice daily, I talk about the return to Zion. I
Yeah.
literally face Jerusalem. So this idea that you can separate or negate Jews from Judea, you can negate Jews from their ancestral homeland, is ahistorical. You will not be able to turn to a single page of the Hebrew Bible where it does not talk about that. What you can do? You can open any page of the Hebrew Bible, and you know what it won't talk about? Tikkun Olam. And
Right.
it won't talk about the ethics of socialism and Zohran Mamdani. So give me a break with this Jewish values demand I
Right.
support Zohran Mamdani. What a load of horse crap.
Right. Right. So, there's something I was thinking that I think you might actually be able to relate to as another former leftist. Um, to me, Mamdani being elected felt a little bit like the first time Trump got elected. Being very liberal and steeped in my liberal network, that felt like a tragedy. So for
Yeah.
weeks after Trump's first election, I was literally crying throughout the day. I had to work hard not to let it show on the bus, to work, in the office. So, and I often thought about, like, what was it? Like, why was I so heartbroken and shattered? And I don't think it was his specific policies. Like, it's not like I was sitting there being like, "Oh my, this is going to be terrible for the people he'll deport," or whatever. No, I think it was just seeing the images and videos of people who I considered evil at the time being jubilant and triumphant. That just pained me to no end. It was like seeing the worst people winning. It's like good things happening to bad people. It was tormenting. So this time when Trump was running, obviously, you know, it was different for me, right? I no longer, not only did I not feel upset when he won, I actually felt a little bit sort of happy, because for the same reasons as I think you felt, that I felt that the left was hijacked. Some of their policies were more destructive than anything Trump has done. So I no longer felt upset about it. But now, being sort of a little bit on the other side, right, being a little bit more aligned with conservatives, now we have Mamdani, and now I'm feeling it, coming from the left, and that's what I sort of experienced the night. Was a Tuesday night of the by his election victory party. It was sort of like a little bit of like a convention of all the haters. You see Mehdi Hassan, Mahmoud Khalil, Jamal Bowman, literally smiling and being so thrilled that their fellow Israel hater is now in such a position of power. And so obviously it's a little bit less, potent. I'm not going around crying, but I'm feeling like an interesting déjà vu, but from the complete opposite perspective.
Sure. So I would say I have far more faith and confidence in the 3,000-year-old story of the Jewish people than a 33-year-old socialist. And while I'm not going to criticize or disagree with those who have strong emotional reactions to the election of Zohran Mamdani, what I will say is the Jewish people have outlasted the Byzantines and the Romans and the Persians and the Greeks and the Egyptians. We've been around for 3,000 years. We'll be around for the next 3,000 years. This is not
But it
even
came at a
close.
price. It came at a price. We've been slaughtered for real. Like, it's not like.
Correct. That's precisely my point. We have faced far worse. And this, while it is bad, does not come close to what our
Mhm.
parents and grandparents and ancestors have experienced. Is this a
Right.
politician that we like? No, but we also live in a democracy, and you can bet your ass that not only will the Jewish community be coming out in strong numbers in 4 years to vote against Mamdani, but keep in mind we have a midterms where Elise Stefanik is up for governor, and I will do my absolute best to ensure that the Jewish community vote in favor of Elise Stefanik and repudiate a woman like Kathy Hochul, who endorsed Zohran Mamdani. So I'm not trying to be an optimist. I am trying to be a realist, and I'm trying to put things in perspective. Is it bad? Absolutely. Is this the election result we wanted? Absolutely not. But the Jewish people are far greater than, as I said, a 33-year-old socialist who can't
Right.
identify Israel on a map. So I was asked this yesterday by the BBC, will Jews leave New York? Maybe, 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 maybe. I'm not convinced a whole lot will. But if they do, and this is kind of the kicker, they're not going to Israel. I mean, we've
Right.
actually seen, even post October 7th, there's not been a surge of American Jews leaving America. What they will do if they leave New York is they'll go to Florida, they'll go to North Carolina, they'll go to
Right.
Texas.
Mhm.
Anecdotally, I can tell you about friends and family of mine who've done all of those things. So Jews in America actually really like America. We really like being Americans, unlike Zohran Mamdani and Jamal Bowman and Mehdi Hassan and Hassan Piker. We
Mhm.
really like this country. And if New York City is inhospitable both to our people, whether it's from a religious perspective, whether it is from
Mhm.
a financial and cost of living or quality of life perspective, we'll move somewhere else. And that's why I think these scare tactics that many in the Jewish community are orchestrating, I think are really unhelpful. They really are. And I read an article this morning, an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal by Tevi Troy from the Yeshiva University Strauss Center. And I got to say, I was really appalled to read it. I think it's the exact opposite of what we should be doing. He said, I'm contemplating wearing a baseball cap over my kippah. I mean, if you have such little confidence in your Judaism, then yeah, you should move to Israel. Then don't be here. We need people who are going to double down on their Judaism, who are going to wear their yarmulkes and their Star of David necklaces, who are going to wave their Israeli flags and their American flags, who are going to go to their synagogues every week, hopefully every day, but at least every week in droves, that's what we need. And if you're
Right.
so scared of the communists that you're going to have to start wearing a baseball cap, then maybe you shouldn't be here.
Wow. I totally agree. Okay, so since we have a few more minutes and I have you here, if you don't mind, I wanted to pivot to talk about another topic that's currently in the news, and that's the civil war happening inside the conservative movement regarding where to draw the line when it comes to inviting and platforming open bigots and anti Semites. So I saw your video you recently posted, maybe on your status, about how Jews should appreciate the Christian people who are pro-Israel and who love Jews. It reminded me actually of a talk that I heard from Jared Kushner about a year or two ago at the ADL annual conference, where he similarly called out Jewish institutions and people for not appreciating more and for distancing themselves from, the Christians who support us. But I wanted to ask you, where would you draw the line? So I know you believe Nick Fuentes definitely does not belong in the conservative movement. How about Tucker Carlson? I think I saw you had a picture basically saying that he too is not MAGA, I think. But he's become pretty mainstream, and but again, his own views are pretty disturbing itself, and in my opinion, worthy of also not including in that movement. But then it brings me to a person like Megyn Kelly, and I feel like she's just sort of playing cutesy about this whole topic, like, "I will not disown a friend, I will not distance from a friend," and platforms him. And the question is like, what is she trying to do? Is that acceptable? Like, so yeah, basically, where would you draw the line?
First of all, it's not that Shabbos Kestenbaum thinks that Nick Fuentes is not a conservative. Nick Fuentes doesn't think that Nick Fuentes is a conservative. I was on Newsmax yesterday, and I basically quoted Zoolander, where I said, I think I'm on crazy pills here. Because I, for example, I voted for President Trump. I spoke at Trump rallies. I spoke at the Republican
Right.
convention. I registered hundreds of voters to vote for Donald Trump. I traveled across the country for months on end to encourage American Jews, liberal American Jews, to vote for Donald Trump. Nick Fuentes, not only did he not support Donald Trump, he told his followers to support Kamala Harris. And
Oh,
he
wow.
told Donald Trump that he is going to bring the Groypers to Michigan to encourage the Muslim community to vote against him. And he just threatened J.D. Vance that he would do the exact same thing in Iowa. So it's not that I don't think he's not a conservative. He doesn't think he's a conservative. What has Nick Fuentes done to advance the MAGA agenda? Like, literally, what is one thing that he's practically done that has helped the conservative movement? It's insane. Again, I feel like I'm on crazy pills here. He is not a
Okay,
Republican.
so
He's not a
forget Nick.
conservative. He's not aligned with MAGA. When it comes to Tucker Carlson, look, there is a cancer in the conservative movement. And the only way you deal with cancer is by eradicating it. You don't invite cancer to your podcasts. You don't invite cancers to your conferences. You don't have debates with cancer. You tell the cancer, you're not welcomed here. Go do your own thing somewhere else, but not here in the conservative movement. And by the way, that literally is a conservative argument.
By the way, it sounds like you're kind of debating Charlie Kirk, kind of, because he's the one who invited him to his
No. I'm
conference.
not debating
How
Charlie
can
Kirk.
we
No.
but he
Charlie, hang on. Charlie Kirk was emphatic. He was explicit and he was public that Nick Fuentes had no role in Turning Point
but
USA.
Tucker.
He had no role in the Republican Party. He had no role in the conservative movement. Charlie Kirk knew that Tucker Carlson was peddling in this conspiratorial thinking. Charlie Kirk knew that Tucker Carlson was advancing this victimhood mentality, which is a hallmark of the left. Why did Charlie Kirk platform Tucker Carlson? It's because he knew that by disinviting Tucker Carlson, that would create a much bigger problem, a much bigger revolt. So he was sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Right.
And Charlie felt, when it came to Tucker specifically, that it is better to combat bad ideas with better ideas rather than not entertaining the idea at all. So Tucker Carlson was in the Overton window of accepted political discourse. But you know what is not in the Overton window of accepted political discourse? That blacks need to be imprisoned, that women need to be raped, that Jews need to be deported, that Republican state legislators who don't vote the way I want them should be shot in the face. That has no role in conservative discourse. And again, this is a conservative argument that, like, good ideas should win out and bad ideas we don't entertain. And this isn't cancel culture. This is what William Buckley did when he got rid of the John Birch Society. And if the conservative movement or the Republican Party, the Heritage Foundation, whatever, if they truly believe that we need to entertain the Nick Fuenteses and people like Tucker Carlson who amplify and celebrate and normalize the Nick Fuenteses, then I am telling you, as someone someone who saw the destruction of my own Democratic Party through acquiescing and placating and surrendering to the radical elements of their party, Republicans will lose elections. They just will. Forget about the ethics. Forget about whether we, defend anti-Semitism or combat anti-Semitism on a pragmatic political approach. Republicans will lose elections if they cater to Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes, because the overwhelming majority of the American people reject extremism on both sides of the aisle, which is why you cannot take Zohran Mamdani's election as a signifier of what is to come, in the same way you cannot take Nick Fuentes and his artificial bots on Twitter as any indication of the future of the Republican Party. We must expel that garbage from the conservative movement as quickly as possible, as forceful as possible, as publicly as possible.
Right. Okay, one last question. I'm so sorry to keep you up 2 more minutes. So I wanted to ask you about a topic that I've been grappling with, and I think it's on the mind of many of our viewers, and that is about drafting Haredim into the military in Israel. So on the one hand, it seems to me that Haredim have a strong claim to sort of stay out of the military, both because the military isn't very compatible with their very religious lifestyle, and because their existence and strict, adherence to the religion is what keeps Israel's character as a Jewish state. But the facts are that it's breeding resentment within the Israeli society when non-Haredim, they do have to send their kids to battle and potential death, while Haredim get to skip it. And B, it's my understanding that the Israeli military simply needs more hands on deck, more boots on the ground, more soldiers. Otherwise, they keep calling up the same reserves over and over who are exhausted and tired. So you're an Orthodox Jew, so you obviously value the observant lifestyle and emphasis on Torah learning, but you're also not Haredi, and I think people from your community are supportive of joining the IDF. Some of them, even in the U.S., send their kids to serve in the IDF. So how do you feel about that, and what should Israel do to resolve this issue that's tearing Israeli society
So
apart?
I've only commented on Israeli politics twice, to talk about the hostage reform and then talk about Bibi. And both times I get killed because people in Israel say, well, you don't live in Israel and, you shouldn't have an opinion. And I used to abide by that, certainly during wartime. But then it kind of occurred to me, if American Jews are good enough to die being killed in America for supporting Israel, then we're good enough to have an opinion, okay? If you and Israel keep saying that it's a Jewish state, it's a state for all Jews, then we have a right to state our opinion. That doesn't mean we're voting. We're not voting. But we, by virtue of being a Jewish person and by virtue of having a functioning brain, have the ability to comment on Israeli politics. So whereas I used to be more hesitant to publicly espouse my views within Israeli domestic issues, I'm really not that way anymore. And I think Israelis need to stop freaking out when American Jews have their opinions, especially because our tax dollars fund Israel to the tune of billions of dollars every year. So don't freak out when I state my opinion. And if you disagree, fine, good. I'm a member, I'm an elected member of the World Zionist Congress. So I very much have a stake in what happens in Israel. What I will say is this. I don't believe, I want to phrase this in a way whereby people can't take this out of context. It is very important for Israel to have a Jewish characteristic. It is very important. Very important. That is not something they can really surrender. At the same time, we are also living in a Western country whereby you need to be productive to your society. So I don't believe that the Israeli government should be funding any of the yeshivas. But I think it's up to us as American Jews to fund the yeshivas, which is why when Keren Yesod HaTorah, headed by Rabbi Dov Landau Shlita, came to Los Angeles about a month ago to raise hundreds of millions of dollars for the yeshivas, I very willingly donated because I think it is the responsibility of diasporic Jews to support the yeshivas and to support the Haredi community. I don't think it's the responsibility of the Israeli government, whose interests are the productive and economically viable output of their own country, to be supporting a people who adamantly refuse to work. So they should be funded, just not by the government. And as it pertains to the draft, I don't think they should be drafted. But I also believe in incentives. So if people don't want to draft, that's their prerogative, but then they're totally ineligible to both vote, which is what Yair Lapid has said, which I support, and they are ineligible to receive any funding from the Israeli government. And by the way, if Israel were to do those two things, they would start seeing that the draft enrollment rate amongst the Haredi community would skyrocket. Okay? As I said, I'm a market capitalist. I believe in incentives. We're not going to force you to draft, and the more you try to force the Haredi to draft, the more they will resist it. Okay? It's just not going to work. What you can do is say, fine, don't draft, but we're not funding you. And I actually think the solution is quite simple. I'm actually kind of unclear as to why Israel hasn't done this decades ago. Because again, you're not going to force people to draft. They will resist it. What you can do is provide incentives, give carrots. And as I said, if they don't want to draft, they just won't be funded. And you'll see quite quickly they will want to be drafted.
Right. Well, the answer to your wondering why it hasn't happened yet has to do with the coalition government. The Haredim tend to be a decisive party that joins ruling government, and that's why they've been able to, stymie any such efforts. But okay, that's this is just the beginning of another conversation. Maybe, hopefully, we'll have you over again to dive into one of these topics deeper. But thank you so much for joining me. It was truly an illuminating conversation. I really appreciate it, and I hope you'll come back. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all for tuning into this podcast. Again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to subscribe to the podcast, like, comment, and share all these episodes with your friends, colleagues, and family members. Thank you, and have a good day.